Hey everyone, this is Donna. You're looking at my iPad camera. We're going to be doing Procreate and Tech Tips with Sequential Artist Workshop, and we're going to take a look um, in Procreate at the adjustments menu, which includes all kinds of interesting things. And then we're going to take a look also very quickly towards the end in Affinity Photo at adjustments and what is a really important feature in Affinity Photo, Photoshop, and other apps that Procreate doesn't have, um, just so you know the difference. And if you have one of those other apps, you may want to use it sometimes. So I'm just gonna start with this picture. This is the thing we drew, and this is my sample drawing that I did in the class we just finished. And so it's just a silly comic page with colors and stuff. If you look in the adjustments menu, so open something that you have, or make a copy of something, duplicate a image. I don't want you to ruin something that you're working on, but go in when you're in your gallery, swipe left on something that you've got, a comic or a drawing, and duplicate it, and then open it. And we can play with this image with the things that are in the adjustments menu. And I just want you to, have something to play with that you don't care if you ruin it. You don't have to worry about it. That's why I said to duplicate it first. So if you look in the adjustments menu on Procreate, which is the magic wand on the upper left, you see there's a few groups of things. The first group has to do with colors. So we've got hue, saturation, brightness, color balance, curves, and gradient map. I use all of these. I use color balance the least, but I use all of these. And then the next group is blur. So I use the Gaussian blur the most and motion blur. I don't know if I've ever used perspective blur, but they're all useful. So I'll show you a couple things to do with the first two. I don't have anything special to show you with perspective blur because I don't really use that one myself. And then the rest of these things in this big group change the texture of the image and add little color fit crazy color things. And one that's really useful is sharpen. So if you have some line art that's a little blurry, you can use sharpen on it. So I'll show you all of these, but sharpen I find really useful, especially if I take a picture of it of some ink drawing and it comes out a little blurry. Or if I move something around and Procreate a lot and it gets blurry, I can sharpen the edges back up. And halftone is cool for making like old-fashioned comics, vintage comic style there. And then liquefy is I use for several different things. And clone is mostly used for photo retouching, but sometimes I use it if I have a picture of something and there's like I spilled ink on it or something, I might use clone to cover that up. So I'll show you all of those. The thing about all of these things, let me turn on my do not disturb so you don't have to see my text messages coming in. The thing about all of these things is that, come on, stop, leave me alone. All of these things is that they work on one layer. They all work on one layer, except liquefy is the only one you can select multiple layers to use. But the rest of these you work on one layer at a time. So you can see here in this drawing, I have a bunch of layers. And you may or may not have a bunch of layers in your drawing, and that's okay because we'll play with these at various levels. But I just wanted to inform you of that because if you want to use one of these on your whole image, you'll have to make a one layer version of your image. So we'll do that when we get further down in the list. For now, either on your whole image or pick a layer. I'm going to use this tree here, this color of the tree here for my layer to work with for now. If we go on to the very first thing on the list, hue, saturation, and brightness. So go ahead and select the layer in yours. It's best if it has colors on it. and go into hue, saturation, and brightness. And so those are the three things that you see on the bottom of the screen. I always start with I always work on them backwards. So brightness makes the thing brighter or darker. If you go all the way to max, it turns it white. And if you go all the way to black, zero, it turns it black. When you first open these things, they're all on 50%. So that's your current state. I use the brightness changes for various things. Like if I wanted to make a drop shadow of that tree, this is cool. I would make a duplicate of that layer. So I duplicated my tree layer, and then I'm going to go to the bottom one, and I can go to hue, saturation, and brightness and make it black. Of course, now it's invisible because it's hidden by the other layer with the colors. But if I go into this again and skip to that second group with the blur, I can blur that. And you see how it has a shadow behind it now, and it looks like it's popping up off the page. I can move that to one side or the other if I have like a light source. Or I can just leave it where it is. Either way, it makes the thing, that's how you could make a drop shadow. And however much you use the Gaussian blur is how much it softens and blurs out. So changing to black is something you can use a lot for that kind of thing. But back to my green and brown tree layer, I can change the brightness of the whole layer. If I just made it too dark and I want it brighter, I can change the saturation if I don't like the way I did the color. And then I can change the hue, which is actually the color. And I can move it a tiny bit or a lot. So you can just, mess around with that. Usually for something like a tree, I might say, oh, I made that a little too blue. What happens if I drag it over a little bit to the yellow? And for those kind of adjustments, I only move it a little. But if I'm doing clothes of a character or some kind of just craziness thing, I might just completely change the color palette by dragging it. So that works if you use hue saturation on a whole layer, but you can use it with selections too, which is really cool. So I'm going to go into I'm on my same tree layer. So whatever layer you're working on that you're playing with, I'm going to take my selection tool on freehand. And I want to add some variation to this tree. I did this in the class. And so I'm just going to draw kind of a crazy thing all over this tree layer. When I get done, I'm going to touch the little dot. When you start making a freehand selection, it makes a little dot. And when you get done, you can touch it and you can see the solid area is what I have selected, and then the lines are not selected. So now whatever I do will only happen to the selection. I'm going to blur my selection a little, and that's called feather. So instead of having hard edges, I'll move that over a little bit. I mean, you can blur it completely, but then it doesn't really have the shape anymore. If you move it over somewhere lower than 10%, it will have I don't know if you can see it. See how the edge is not sharp now? If I turn the feather all the way down, my edge there is really, really sharp. But when I go into feather and move it up, it gets blurry. And when you have this feather thing up, it won't let you do anything else. So you have to touch your screen so that this thing disappears, and then you can continue. So now that I have like just a weird selection and a little bit blurred, I can go into my hue, saturation, brightness in the adjustments. Notice the selection thing stays blue. And I'll go into hue, saturation, and brightness. And now I can just change part of the tree to be a little different. And you can make it as different as you want. I'll make it a little different. And see, now I've added like variation to my tree. I can do that again, same exact thing, and like maybe go in a different direction with a crazy selection. And this time I made it darker. Now I can go in and make some areas brighter and pick more saturation and pull the color in the other direction. And then I end up with like this pattern on my tree. We can do more with that pattern when we go into some of the other things on this menu. So hue, saturation, and brightness that's what it does. It changes those three things on one layer at a time. Any questions on that? No? Okay, so that's just I might use that and then do more with it. But if you start with one color and you use that, you get colors that are near and they still sort of blend with your color palette without having to go in here and define, 300 shades of green that are all close, or whatever the other things you're doing. So, yeah, I do it in hair a lot too, like on this character's layer. She's got this black hair, and I might go in with the same thing on her hair layer and do a little thing like that and put some highlight. Whoops. You can make multiple little selections too. Every time you want to start a new part, you just touch the gray dot. As long as it says add down here, which is the default, it will let you add another spot. And so if I do that on her hair and go into hue, saturation, and brightness, well, it's black, so I can't go any darker really, nothing will happen. But I can kind of give her gray hair, and I'm not going to change the saturation, I'm just going to change the brightness. And now she's got some highlights in her hair. Whoops, turn off my selection. Oh, come on. I undid it somehow. But I do this in hair a lot to add like little shapes and highlights and shadows to hair. So I keep touching the wrong thing right now, but now she's got white spots in her hair that doesn't really look like hair color. But play with this for different things that you need texture on. You can also do it on clothes. So on her layer with her yellow dress, I could take the selection and I could go here along the bottom and pick some parts where the hemline has a curve in it. And I've got multiple selections. And if I don't feather it and I go hue, saturation, brightness, and make it a little darker and let's saturate it and maybe push the hue. And notice I only move these 45, 43, 48. I didn't move them a lot. But now look, she's got, her dress looks like it has like wrinkles or folds in it because I added some shadows where the hemline was curving. So you can use this for a lot of little different things like that. So hue, saturation, and brightness is really cool. Color balance. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I was using a drawing with a red blouse, and I lost the red altogether. And how did I do that? How did I lose
Well, you possibly pull the hue all the way. If you pull the hue all the way over, you can change the color completely. So maybe you moved it too far.
I probably did. I was going nuts here with the hue.
Yeah, that's probably what you did. And if you didn't have selection made, then your whole layer changes. Like now I've lost my yellow and I've turned her all completely blue.
Okay, and I can't get that red back unless I
You can undo, undo, undo.
Okay.
Remember, two finger tap is undo, and you can do that as many times as you want until you leave Procreate. And three finger tap is redo. So once you leave this image, once I hit gallery, my undos are gone. But as long as I'm still in here, I can undo like 50 times if I need to and go way back.
Okay.
If I mess something up. So yeah, remember the undo. And if you have it set turned on and I never turned it off, you also have an undo and redo thing little here. But I always just use my two finger tap. And if you put your two fingers down and hold them down, once you start undoing, it'll just undo, 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 undo all the stuff really fast. So now I've gone all the way back to the beginning of my image before I changed anything.
Right.
And I can redo. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I can redo and hold my three fingers down once I start going. And look, now it's redoing all those steps. So, but once you hit gallery, you don't have those undos anymore. They're erased from the image. So, and I probably said it a few other times. I know I said it today. I made a duplicate before I started working on this. So if you're going to do something new and experimental in your image, make a duplicate first so you don't ruin it. You know, if you had ruined that and you couldn't figure out how to get the red back, you could go back to your other version. So, yeah. So, okay. So any other questions on hue, saturation, and brightness? All right. Color balance, I don't use that much, but again, this works on one layer. And I'll just pick this girl's, I have her purple hair and her orange dress on one layer here. So I'll just pick this little girl and we'll just go into color balance and look what happens. We've got three things here and they're opposites on the color wheel. So we have cyan and red, magenta and green, yellow and blue. And then we have a little star here that lets you work on the shadows, midtones, and highlights. I think people mostly use this for photo retouching, but if I wanted to make the highlights on this, the lightest parts change, I could pick highlights, and then I could say, make my highlights more green, more yellow, more cyan. Oops, and you can see that one changed it a lot. My dress is a highlight because the color is a bright value, and I can change that a lot. I don't use this as much. Like I said, it's mostly used for photo retouching. Like if you take a picture and your sky comes out a little too purplish or something, you could go in and, you know, push it towards the blue. But it's worth playing with sometimes if you want. I don't use it a lot, but it does, each of those three things, it changes separately, those three color balances, and you can do it on, as I said, shadows, midtones, and highlights. So now that I'm on midtones, when I move it, you can see her hair, her hat color is changing more than her dress. Whoops, also her dress affects this one more. It's very technical how this works. So you notice the magenta and green changes more on the dress on midtones, and the cyan and red has more of effect on the dress on the highlight. And it's deciding what each pixel is and kind of RGB, where it is on the RGB scale. So this is a very technical thing if you want to use it in photo retouching or exactly know what's happening. But if you just want to play with colors, it's worth looking at sometimes. Not one of my most used features. Okay, so now we're to one. The next one on the list is curves, and I never use curves for one layer. I always use curves. Well, I do. I use curves for two purposes. One is it basically can adjust the contrast in your image. And if I wanted to change my whole picture to adjust the curves, I can't do that right now because it's, you know, made up of a whole bunch of layers. So this is something I would do at the very end of a project. And before I mess with the curves at the very end, and I use it to boost the contrast, you can make a copy of your whole image all at once by going into the actions and the add button and say copy canvas. Once you say copy canvas, the paste item should become available. So right away you can say paste. So nothing changed here, but what happened? If I look in my layers, now I have all my original layers, but I have a new copy of my image that's all on one layer. So whatever I do to this will not mess up my all my other work. This is just a last touch, but I'm doing it to a single layer. Because as I said, these things for the most part only work on one layer at a time. Liquify is the only one that can work on multiple layers. So what I like about curves is, like I said, the boost contrast. So this is what I use it for. So I'm on my new layer. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and make a new layer by just going to the top near the top of your palette, and then say actions, add, copy canvas, and then paste so that you get a copy of your image. You can do that multiple times, as you just see. I did it twice. So you get a copy of your image at the top that's got everything. It's as if you saved it as a JPEG where it flattens it all, but it's still inside your Procreate file. So I'm going to go into then adjustments, curves. And the curves, this shows you a bunch of stuff about what's going on, again, with the numbers and the RGB and stuff within your file. The default thing it comes up to highlighted is gamma. I never use the red, green, and blue in this curves. I always am adjusting the gamma. The other ones, again, are used mostly for photo retouching. But what I like to do is, instead of having this straight line, if you want to boost the contrast in your image, you make this into kind of like an S. So somewhere here, near the top is white, the bottom is black, and the right side is white, and the left side is black. So that's what's happening there. So to boost the contrast, you make it kind of into an S. So you pull up somewhere near the white edge towards the top, and you pull down somewhere near the black edge towards the bottom. And can you see how my contrast is increasing as I do that? And I can go back in and click and hold on a point and delete it to go back to where it was. Whoops. But if you make that little bit of an S, and it's not too severe, but it does make your contrast, it does boost your contrast. And of course, you can play with this and do all other kind of crazy things with it too. Like if you just want to have fun there, that I just made a crazy curve, and that's kind of fun. Just for investigating, finding fun color palettes. So if you want to make a surrealistic image, like a dream scene in your thing. But normally I'm using this for curves, for making that S curve and boosting my contrast so that I have my lights are lighter and my darks are darker. Because I have a habit of working all in midtones and not making enough contrast in my images. So if you have that same problem or same habit, you can fix that in here. So that's what curves is. And that's what I use it for anyway in comics. Like I said, if you use RGB, you can do other things, and feel free to play with that if you want. Any questions about curves? I'm going to show you something else you can do with curves, but any questions about this part?
Yes, so I added another drawing and my color palette on another layer, and my color palette is now quite muted. Why is that? So like I tried to, yeah, go ahead.
What did you do? You went,
yeah, I added a bush on a new layer at the top because I didn't feel my drawing had much in it. And then I wanted to fill the bush with a green color, and it's, my whole palette looks really muted.
Did you fill the whole layer with something by accident?
Geez, just no, I made a new layer and put a bush in it and tried to fill the bush, and it's just and when I went to the disc, it's all very muted. Should I have gone back?
Are you in an CMYK image?
Oh, maybe I am. How do I find
because
that?
when you if you do a RGB image, which is what I usually work in on Procreate, if you do an RGB image, everything here will be very bright in this circle, and you can get very bright colors here. If you make a CMYK image, everything will be somewhat muted, because when you print, you can't get these brightest colors. And so it tries to show you, when you put CMYK, when you choose CMYK, when you make a new canvas, it will try to show you what it will look like printed. So it makes everything muted here.
Okay, and I can't change it back to RGB, can I, once it's done?
You can't actually change from CMYK to RGB, but whatever you did to mute, if you did it here, you can undo. You can undo anything while you're in the image. like I said, until you hit gallery, then you're out of luck. But you
So
can do anything,
I had to do
undo
something
anything.
for submission that required CMYK. I didn't think it
Right.
was this drawing, but did it change every drawing in my gallery?
No, it should
No.
not change every drawing. I think what you could do is you could post a screen capture of what you've got in the Mighty Network. We can look at it together in the group and figure out what happened there.
Okay, thank
Because
you.
I'll need to see it to see
Okay,
what's give you some suggestions of what's going on there.
okay, thanks, Donna.
Hmm. But if you do notice something, if you don't get bright colors in here, a lot of times it's because you did made a CMYK image. Any other questions about this? All right. So I boosted contrast there. So that's nice for a finished image. But another time that boosting contrast is really cool is if you have taken a picture of a drawing. So this is something from my sketchbook that I took a picture of. It's not even a great picture and it's got shadows all over it, but I want to use it in this comic. And so I had it in my photo album and I had this comic page made. So I just went into the action ad and said, insert a photo. So I put my photo into my Procreate file and I'm like, oh my gosh, well, that's no good. I want it to be white with black. So I can use curves to fix that. It's not always perfect depending how bad your photo is, but you can see this is pretty bad with the shadows and it also has these gray check lines in it. So let's see what I can do. I'm on this layer, which is my image. And I'm going to do one thing first, because when you take a photo, it's in color. And so there might be some hues of, it might not be pure black and white. So first thing I'm going to do to this layer is I'm going to go into hue, saturation, brightness, and just turn the saturation all the way down. You may see a big difference, you may not, but what that's doing is making that layer pure grayscale. There's no colors in it anymore because saturation is at none, which means everything's gray. So I did that. Now I'm sure like there's no red in there or yellow hue or blue reflection. And now I can use curves and I can play with the curves, like I said, to bring the white side up and the black side down. Whoops, that's too much, maybe. I don't know. And you can play with this and make this S curve as extreme as you want. So I started over here with the white dot, and now I'm dragging it like to the middle. And then I can drag the black side. If you drag it too far, it reverses. But I can drag the black side to make the lines, the black parts darker. And you can see that's a really extreme kind of S now, not smooth. But look what it's done to my image. It's like almost pure black and white now. And it's not perfect depending on, how bad your drawing is and your photo, but that was pretty bad. And now it's pretty good, in my opinion, for working on it as a comic. And of course, if you're working on, you know, this kind of paper, which is in the planner, you're going to expect to see that stuff on the drawing. But as far as the paper color, the lighting, the shadow, that's all gone. I would have to redraw part of this arm if I wanted the lines to be more solid, but the rest of it's pretty good. So that's another thing that you can use curves for. Again, you're on the gamma level and you make an S and you just make it more and more extreme. Now I can't do it again because I've already done it. So there's no shades of gray in there. Everything's black and white now already. But so you can use the same feature to adjust a finished drawing to just give it a little more contrast, or you can use it to fix a sketch or inking that you did on paper and brought in and make it much more usable for having it in Procreate and using that without having to redraw it. Questions about that? I think it's a pretty cool feature for creating because I do this a lot. I bring stuff from sketchbooks into my comics a lot. I mean, obviously I can go in and take my eraser tool and, erase parts that I don't want to be there at all. I don't know what it's even doing now. But anyway, the curves thing is great for that. And it boosts the contrast, and you can boost it a little bit to change your image to be more contrasty, or you can boost it a lot to change a sketch to more pure black and white. All right. So this is another of my image, and it'll show some drawing. I duplicated it. So you can, make another copy of your drawing or just keep working in the same file. That's fine. I'm going to mess with the gradient map feature. And I did that once before the other day, and I got this. So I made this color design for this page just by using gradient map. Now, again, gradient map works on the whole image at once. And well, what we want to do is change the whole image at once, but the gradient map feature only changes one layer at a time. So I'm just going to delete these extra layers that I've got here. And again, I'm going to go into the wrench actions, add, copy canvas. And as soon as paste shows up, paste. And I've got the new copy of my image there. Now I can go into, because I have everything on one layer, I can go into adjustments, gradient map, and that's the same one I had picked. So Procreate comes with some stuff in there. So if you look, you'll see one called Mystic, Breeze. These ones called Gradient are just ones that I had made. Instant, Venice. So it comes with some. Let me make my text smaller on my screen for a second. I make my text bigger when I'm doing the Procreate. Summer. Hey guys, sorry about that. I disappeared for a couple minutes because I'm at my mom's and there's bad weather and their Wi-Fi is not that great. So we're going to look at the gradient map again. And let me just go back. I'm not sure exactly where it cut out. So what we had done was we opened an image. I had this drawing that had a bunch of layers, and I used the actions, add, copy canvas, and then paste to make a new layer that has my whole image in it. And my camera turned funny. Can't wait to go home and have all my own great internet stuff back. Anyway, let me hold on a second while I see if I can readjust stuff so that I can highlight my camera again. No, I can't. Okay, I need you to pin my iPad camera for yourself because Zoom won't let me do it for you now because I dropped out and came back. So sorry about that. But if you pin it for yourself, then you should be able to hopefully still see it. Anyway, so I've got that in there. I made a copy of my image. That's one layer. My other stuff is still there. And I'm going to go into the adjustments gradient map. And as I said, or you may or may not have heard, because it dropped out, Procreate comes with some built in. Like there's one called Mystic, Breeze, Instant, Venice. When you touch it once, it switches to whatever gradient map you touch. When you touch it a second time, it opens this bar. And in this bar, you can move the colors around and you could add colors. If you press and hold, it will add a thing. And it should let you change the color. Yep. When you touch one of these little squares, you can see them better here where it's lighter. When I touch the square, my color wheel comes up and I can change these however I want. Normally, the way a gradient map works is you want to start, the top would be white, the bottom would be black, or the right would be white and the left would be black. And so you would add the lightest colors you're using in your gradient map towards the top and darker colors towards the bottom. And as you do that, you can do whatever crazy stuff you want. But if you use all similar colors, you can get one kind of design. If you use colors that are more like opposites on the color wheel, you get more contrast in that way. So I'm done with that. I'm going to turn it off. So I made this gradient map layer. And when I turn it on and off, you can see that was my original image. Here's my gradient map version. And I can either use that as it is, or I can play with the opacity of it and the layer blend modes to do special effects on the colors of my drawing.
Excuse me, Donna.
Yeah.
How did you get that one image where all the layers are combined?
Yep.
At the top of all your other ones?
Yep. Let me show you. So I'm in my layers.
Yeah.
And we'll ignore the one I just did because that's already there. I turned it off. So you're seeing my original drawing that's made up of a whole ton of layers, right? And I can turn each layer on and off. But what I want is all one layer. So I'm going to go while I'm in my layer group at the top. I want to be at the top because I want the new image to come all the way to the top. So click at the top of your layers. You see what you want, and then you go into Actions, Add, and you press Copy Canvas. And if you didn't have anything in your clipboard, paste might be grayed out, but once you touch Copy Canvas, paste should turn dark, and you can paste, and what it pastes in is your whole drawing on one layer. So it's Actions, Add, Copy Canvas, Paste.
Thank you.
And that, yep, and that adds it. And it's like having another copy of your drawing all on one layer. Your other layers are still in there, so you can still use those. And then the reason we did that is because gradient map only works on one layer at a time, and I wanted to play with my whole image. So you can see here, you do the gradient map, and you can play with the opacity of the gradient map layer because your other layers are still under there, and you can play with the blend modes. And the way you get to the blend modes and the opacity is by touching this little letter that's next to the checkbox. When you start out, it will say N for normal, but when you change the blend mode, which is this whole list of things, they're called layer blend modes, it starts out as normal. And then when you change it, they have different names. Color dodge, this one's add, this one's overlay. I can scroll down. This one's hard mix, difference. So they all do different things to the colors. I can't explain what they do because I don't really know. The ones above normal generally make things darker. The ones below normal generally make things lighter. But really what I do is just scroll through them and see what happens. And you can combine your oh gosh. So that I just got kicked out again, huh? Okay, you guys. So since my Wi-Fi is not cooperating, I think we're going to wrap this up for today. And we will continue with the adjustments menu next time. And I will be home with my super fast fiber optic Wi-Fi, and we won't have to worry about me getting kicked off in the middle and all of that. So I hope that was fun and you got some ideas, and we can review any of this next time. You can ask me questions about it too. So yeah, I'll see you in a couple weeks on Fast Wi-Fi.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Bye.